Welcome back. Another episode of RX'D Radio. We're kind of getting in the trend of recording these intros right before the podcast release. It's 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, October 4th, Tuesday. This is going to be dropping live 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time Wednesday morning, so inside the 12-hour mark. Sorry, Lundy, appreciate you getting this through the line. But the reason we waited up for this intro to be recorded is we were working night and day. That's a lie. We sent a few text messages back and forth to our good friends at HD Muscle, Dorian Hamilton, Noah Hamilton, Mariah Hamilton, and Kathleen Houston. And we finally did it. We got it. We got an HD Muscle sponsor. So they decided to come on board. You know, they've been as close to family as I think I've had over the last 4 years. I was a sponsored athlete with them, and now they're going to sponsor the podcast. So I know a lot of you guys out there use HD Muscle supplements, and now you can start to save a little cash with promo code RX'D Radio, RX'D Radio for HD Muscle. That's their entire supplement line, as well as apparel. You're looking at everything from the best grass-fed organic whey on the market. Trust me, I've tried all of it. Pre-HD Ultra, Pre-HD Elite. If you guys are looking for no stim or with stim, the Ultra has stim, caffeine. It comes from like multiple sources as well. It's probably one of my favorite pre-workouts I've ever come across. And if you guys know us, you know we don't just fuck around with anyone. The tagline for HD Muscle is integrity is everything. And I've seen a lot of supplement companies come and go. I've seen the inner workings, being a sponsored athlete with a few companies prior to working with them. And I think the biggest thing is I just know these dudes personally, and it means a lot to me to have them on board with us and be able to kind of get all this under one roof. So if you think, Dr. Dwayne Jackson works with us, also works with HD. We've had Adil Khan on the podcast a handful of times, who's going to be low-key working with us. Close friend of the show, also works with HD. Our studio is in Pure Muscle and Fitness. So, guys, I really can't thank the people at HD, Dorian, Noah, Mariah, and Kathleen for making this happen. So show some love. If you guys look for pre-workout protein, they also have a health line, raw ingredients, glutamine, creatine. Go to hdmuscle.com. And at checkout, use code RXD for 10% off. Premium product, but you're at a point, hopefully, in your training career where you start to take this stuff seriously. What goes into your body matters. If you're going to take your training seriously, you're going to take your nutrition, your supplementation seriously. These guys are the same front lines. Dorian's actually a few days out. When this releases, he'll be 3 days out looking to secure that pro card. So go tell him that we sent you. And yeah, we're just really excited to be on board. I literally told them I wouldn't work with another supplement company, so we were either going to work with them or not with any supplement company. So hope you guys enjoy it. And good timing as well on today's episode. We got big Ron Partlow, Canadian bodybuilding legend, and just a legend of a human being. Gain a lot of perspective from Ron. Come up in the bodybuilding scene from Alberta, Canada, Edmonton, Alberta, and just was able to keep such a perspective on the industry. I don't think, that's a lie. He's not from Edmonton. He's from Alberta, but I think he's from outside of Edmonton. Anyways, sorry, Ron, if I fucked that up. But, Ron came up pre-social media days, early inspiration for me. Mutant on a Mission was probably one of the first things where I thought, wait a minute, what do we have here? Travel and training. That's interesting. I like that. And just all around the level of humility he's able to have, the level of gratitude that he has, a rarity in any industry, let alone the fitness and bodybuilding industry. So huge thanks to Ron. Had us out to West Coast Iron, hosted the entire Prescript crew. Unbelievable hospitality. Can't recommend, if you're in the area, and even if you're not, find yourself in the area. West Coast Iron, a true mecca of bodybuilding. Would be like the Western Canadian mecca. Just such a cool feel, such a cool vibe, great people. Steve Didoshak also has a hand in the ownership staff there. Amazing Canadian bodybuilder. But yeah, without any further ado, guys, supplementation moving forward, head on over to hdmuscle.com. Use promo code RXD at checkout. Get yourself 10% off. Let them know, right? Let them know. I know a lot of you guys are using HD products, and save yourself a bit of money. Let them know the power behind the RX'D Radio cohort, the Prescript brand. So, guys, I do appreciate it as always. If you're watching this on YouTube, and yes, you can watch this on YouTube. Well, this one's kind of shit, but this is the disclaimer. A little bit of apologies, but road game not that strong. Actually, that was on me. I forgot the charger for the camera. So there will be the first 20 minutes or so of video. But then it'll just cut to audio. So do apologize if you're on the YouTube channel. It does cut out. There's nothing wrong. It's just I forgot to pack all the shit. But if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, check it out. All our old episodes are up there in the studio. If you want to check it out, subscribe. Just search RX'D Radio or Jordan Shallow or the Muscle Doc or whatever. You'll find it. I think it's on my channel. But that's it. Ron Partlow, episode, I don't know, 300, whatever. You guys enjoy. We'll see you next week.
You're tuned in to RX'D Radio.
And how long have you guys been doing this for?
We just started doing that a few months ago.
Okay. But like, how long have you been doing the podcast for?
Episode 170.
Jesus.
So over 2 years, yeah.
You're a couple years in.
3 years, yeah.
Because you were like kind of the first bodybuilding podcast.
Well, I had All Bull with
Right.
Matt Meinrod
Yeah.
back in the day. And then before that, I had Canadian Bodybuilding Radio, which we were recording on GarageBand on our laptops. And that was in like 2009, 2010. It was me and my buddy Steve King. And we had Chris Aceto, Chad Nichols, Hani Rambod. We had lots of good guests back then because I already kind of knew everybody, even though it was like a long time ago. So that was cool.
2010?
Yeah, we were doing a podcast in 2010 and we were releasing it, and we had a little website you could go and download the episodes. It was like old school.
What was the impetus to starting a podcast in 2010? Like, who were you? Was it just like Rogan? You're like, oh, this seems cool. We're going to do this?
Yeah, Steve, my buddy Steve King, he came to me with the idea, and he was just like, hey, it'd be cool. There isn't one, we should have one. Because like Rogan was already on, wasn't he, in 2010? Was he already on?
I would assume.
I didn't even know about podcasts until like probably 2014.
Yeah.
Really?
Really?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know, but it was 2010. Yeah, we started doing it. It might have been 2009. It was 2009.
Jesus.
It was 2009
Wow.
because we had Mike Van Wyck on right after he won the Canada.
Come on.
Yeah.
Was he as inflammatory then as he is now?
No, he was the same dude, but yeah, he
Just way less jaded?
he wasn't marketing yet.
Oh, my God.
yeah,
dude.
way less jaded. Yeah,
He
yeah.
has got
He just
the
got fresh
formula.
out of bodybuilding. Yeah.
He's got the social media formula. Like, this guy
Yeah, he's doing well.
has went from like old man yells at cloud to almost 200,000 followers in like a year and a half.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah,
Wild.
Yeah.
But you've always kind of been ahead of the curve, though. Like, what was your first YouTube?
I've always been desperate to try to find relevancy.
no, that's not fair. Fuck you. I'm not gonna allow the self-deprecation.
What do I gotta do?
But
I gotta
it's
do
like,
something.
I mean, Mutant on a Mission,
Yeah.
like the vlog series on YouTube, and that probably predates YouTube.
No. So Mutant on a Mission started in 2014. The idea, I sold it to Mutant in 2013, and we did our first episode 2014, and we've got like 7 seasons now of that show. I've been to over 60 gyms now with that show.
When
Wow.
I think, so I sometimes get posed the question or the statement like, you must have trained, like people think I've trained at the most amount of gyms ever.
Right.
Because I travel a lot. I'm like, I think there's one guy who's probably been to more gyms, and that's you.
Yeah, I've been to a lot of gyms now, man. That show has been awesome. Like, and I remember every single one of them. I remember every woman.
What is it about? Because you're so different in that sense. Like the traveling, the early days to the content, the adopting content as whether it's a hobby, whether it's something that you see as necessary for the business side of things. But bodybuilders are usually so reclusive, like they're so withdrawn. Like the idea of traveling and training and people are just they won't do it. Why do you think that is? Why does it not bother you? Did it ever cross your mind that
I can't imagine turning down like a privileged opportunity. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, if you're not like, I always knew I wasn't the next Kevin Levrone. Like, I wasn't a delusional kid. I was like, man, I think I might be able to get a pro card. Like, that was me. Like, I wasn't like, I'm going to be Mr. Olympia. I just wanted a seat at the table, And so any time I got a chance to do anything in the industry, like when Mutant started asking me to do this, I was like, yep. I'd just say yes. I wouldn't even understand what was going on. I'd go, yep, throw me in front of a camera. What do you want me to do? And, like Ryan Keller, my old boss at Mutant, I mean, he signed me in 2011 because I've been with Mutant for 11 years now. And he signed me in 2011. And I remember we were at the 2012 Arnold, and we were just talking to fans. And we had a huge lineup because Rich Piana was right beside me. So it was fucking the dawn of Instagram. Like, I could talk about that. But the lineup was just unbelievably insane. The fire marshal was at our booth. They were freaking out. Rich's line was fucking up the whole expo. And we were just talking to fans. And Ryan pulled me aside, and he goes, because I bartended I worked in the bar for 16 years. And Ryan pulled me aside, and he goes, you can talk to anybody, can't you? And I was like, yeah. Because every time I see somebody, I'm like, where do you train? What's your gym like, And he goes, I'm going to put a microphone in your hand. And within like a month, I had a microphone, and I was interviewing Rich Piana on like an episode of his web series back in the day. And that was my first like interview on camera where I interviewed someone. And then that I'd already done the podcasting before like 09, Canadian Bodybuilding Radio and stuff, and I'd already done All Bull with Matt Meinrod, but I hadn't done an on-camera interview with anybody. So that was the first one I did, and that just led to opportunity.
Do you think
after
that's what
opportunity.
stops other people from doing it? Like they are focused on being the next Kevin Levrone, and they see it as a distraction?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always that gamble, certain guys can afford to do that. They can, Dorian said no to a bunch of shit, just leave me alone. That's what he did to be Mr. Olympia. Other people might fucking regret turning down those opportunities after it's all said and done. I don't know. But I just felt I could tell that it's all about who you know. Life is all who you know, who you meet, who you engage with, and you never know what's going to happen. And you got to throw yourself into shit, you got to just throw yourself in. I just say yes to stuff, and half the time I'm like, fuck, what are we doing, But you get used to it.
So if you were to go back, high school guidance counselor, what did you tell that person what you wanted to be when you grow up? Because I feel like this couldn't have been it because this wasn't a thing.
No. So I remember always, even at a young age, having a really difficult concept with the idea of going to work at a job. I remember just thinking it doesn't make sense. It's not right. So you do what? You go there every day, and then you just go there every day, and then you just do that for 20 years? I remember thinking that, And my dad was a farmer, so I saw that as self-employed, He took a nap when he wanted.
Sick. That's the hallmark of freedom right there.
He took a fucking nap whenever he wanted. You know what I mean? And there would be I sort of like the idea where why do you have to work 8 hours a day? My dad works for 2 months like a madman in the spring, and then tinkers around in the yard for 4 months, and then works 2 months like a fucking madman in the fall and gets a crop off. And we got time for summer holidays, Christmas time, he's kicking back, drinking rum. And I was like, I do something that isn't a job. I get it. I don't want to be a farmer, but there's something there, and I don't know. It just that's always kind of what I thought.
Now, does that
follow? He was free. My dad was free. He worked his ass off, but he was a free man.
Does that follow how you approach bodybuilding? Because you were of an era not necessarily the Sean Ray era, but coming off the heels of where guys would just kind of hey, I got to prep. It's yo, you're real fat, dog. And it's okay. And then boom.
You're totally right. Things have changed a lot. So I got to meet Lee Haney a couple years ago.
Sick.
I saw him in a restaurant. And I was like, Lee. And he took a minute to talk to me. And I told him, went out of my way to tell him, I was like, you were my first Mr. Olympia. When I started training and bought my first magazine, you were Mr. Olympia. And so it's really great to meet you. It was because I started training in 1990. So
happens the year we were born.
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. So it was just like that. It was just, they did 12-week preps. They just went hard. And I remember when I first started at the gym, there was some bodybuilders at that gym, and I remember this one guy was doing a show, and he would be on the bike every day for an hour. And his forearms, because he never showed anything except his cut-off hoodie, but his forearms just got so veiny and fucking crazy looking to me. And I was only a 15-year-old kid. And I remember him telling me, he's like, yeah, hour a day for 8 weeks, no carbs. That's how we do it. I remember him telling me, that's how they dieted. They're like, oh, time to get shredded. steak and broccoli and ride the bike, and 8 weeks later we're on stage. Boom. Like, it was so simple. Like, they weren't even weighing their food. They're just like, I don't know, I have a steak every night, I buy the same one, you know, like, you know what I mean? Like, it was just a different era. But it's so simple, and it was just fucking get it done, and there were no like refeed days or anything like that. It was just, that's just how fucking crazy it was back then.
But it's funny now that I think people are starting to see, even from like a business standpoint, the benefit that comes with having a life outside of bodybuilding. Like, you're riding you're BMXing in the parking lot.
I just rode for an hour and a half.
Shut up.
I just got off my bike. I changed in my truck. I was soaking wet. I just changed in my truck.
Driving through a parking lot and seeing this guy like on the pegs of a little tiny bike.
Rolling around.
You look like a bear in the circus.
Yeah, it's funny.
But like, what is it, do you think? I mean, bodybuilding itself lends to the personality type of someone who can do the same thing every day.
Yeah. I remember my cousin telling me once, she's like, you don't do anything but what you're obsessed with. She's like, you can have a couple things that you're into, but you're completely uninterested in anything outside of those. You're busy. You know, like, you know, some people, I don't know, like some people might go bowling once in a while, or they go skiing once a year, or they do this, or they go camping twice a summer. I don't do anything twice a year. Yeah. I do stuff every day, or I don't do it.
Thank God you never got into like heroin or something.
Right. You know what I mean? Yeah, like twice a summer.
Yeah, twice a summer. Recreational meth user.
When I'm in Seattle.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so I'm just that type of guy, you know, like I have a schedule in my head. I'm, you know, like this week I know what days I'm riding. I also know what nights I'm playing guitar, because I know when my girlfriend's busy and when she's home early. And the nights that she works late, I get an hour of guitar in. So I know what nights I'm playing guitar this week. I know what days I'm training. I know everything. Like it's just how my brain works.
Do you feel like that's? I feel like I've got to know a lot of bodybuilders over the course of the last 10 years, like at the pro level, and there's a weird sense of pride of the monotony. Like, it seems like that's the lone wolf eternal struggle of just. But it doesn't seem necessary.
Yeah, it's sort of, there's something like romantic about the battle, the never-ending battle to stay on track. You mean, like, yeah, I kind of get it, and that's sort of in everything I pick. There's this weird tediousness where it's like incredibly frustrating, and most people just quit. I always pick those things. So like playing guitar is one of them. Like, a lot of people have sat around a campfire and learned a G chord and an F chord, but when they go to try to learn a song, or like, I want to learn this Guns N' Roses song, they're like, fuck this.
Yeah, Wonderwall or bust.
Yeah, Wonderwall or bust, yeah. You need a capo. But only the guitar players will get that joke.
Yeah, I played for 20 years.
So and then the flatland is like the most tedious of all the kind of like trick, like BMX now is 99% park and street riders. Flatlanders are like almost extinct. Like, they're the dying breed of BMX, you know? And they're like all in their 40s or 30s, and they ride alone, and they might have a friend who rides in another city. Like, there's not a lot of us left. Like, the guy that I just rode with for an hour and a half, he's a former X Games rider. He's 46 years old. He's my age. He's got 2 kids. He gets out on his bike once or twice a week, has some fun, still remembers a bunch of his old shit. He's awesome. But he's not as good as he used to be, but he still just loves to get out on his bike and fucking spin and shit. And I get to ride with him now, which is like crazy. Yeah, a complete fluke of a story. But anyways, Flatland is not, it's not popular. Like, there's not a club you can go to. And like, you go down to the park by my house, and there's like 20 kids on BMX there riding bowls every day. Like, you can go make friends, roll around. If you're brand new, you can just carve the easy bowl, right? It's fun. But to go out in a parking lot and try to learn a trick and try it 100 times and fail 100 times and then go home, that's not fun to anybody. So, like, the barrier of entry to Flatland is just insane, because, like, people, like, go out every day for a week and they're just like, fuck, this is stupid. I can't, like, there's no way. There's no way. And then if you just do that, you know, bang your head against a cement wall enough, you learn a trick. And then you get this crazy satisfaction, like the most insane endorphin rush. And you're like, holy fuck, I have a trick now. And then you learn a second trick, and you're like, fuck. And then it's on. And then you're like, that's me. That's what happened again when I got back on the bike. You know?
Can you talk to, how do you talk to bodybuilders? Like, you're still, because my thing is like, all right, imagine you doing a podcast with like one of the BMX guys who just does BMX and like doesn't have an ability to jump the aisle to talk about bodybuilding. And then I imagine you talking to a bodybuilder about BMX. Like bodybuilders just do bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And flatlanders just do flatland.
Yeah.
But you do everything. But like you're wide and deep. And it's just when I think of people with this sounds so bad because so many of them are my friends. But I've been sold on the idea that the lack of breadth in a lifestyle is how you become so good as a bodybuilder.
Right.
Like, do you struggle talking to like modern day bodybuilders who are just like 24/7, and maybe the emergence of Instagram might have something to do with it?
Yeah. No, I think everybody. I think everybody has. Well, sorry. I think most people have more to them than they're able to show or comfortable showing. So there's that. I think a lot of people just aren't comfortable talking about themselves in a way that kind of exposes themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's part of it. But I mean, I was so obsessed when I was bodybuilding. I mean, I wasn't doing anything else. I was playing guitar, but I wasn't like risking an injury on a bike or anything. Like I was just bodybuilding. And, I was the type of guy that skipped fucking weddings and didn't go to birthdays. And I did all that stuff too, But at the same time, I'm like obsessed with music. So like I could go down rabbit holes with like 100 different bands, and I sit on the internet and I'll be like, oh shit, it's 2 a.m. I've been reading about Queen and I don't even really like Queen. But I now know all about the drummer and how the guitar player and the bass player met, and I now know this and how the movie was wrong and what songs they had in the wrong order. And I just, I guess that's my night. Like, I like to rabbit hole. I like to fucking investigate things. I don't know. I like to like chase shit. So sometimes I get frustrated when people like don't know things. Like there's, the joke they say, kids now don't know anything. And I'm like, sometimes I feel like that because I'll be, a song will come on and I'm like, you don't know this song? They're like, no, I've never heard it. And I just go, oh my God. Like, but I understand that's my age showing itself, but it makes me laugh sometimes.
But there's a difference between age and experience. I think that's your experience showing itself.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
I just find it fascinating because like I'm surrounded by bodybuilders.
Right. So here's something that I've thought of. Working in the bar for 16 years was, looking back, what an incredible cast of characters I was exposed to. I was always surrounded by wacky people and interesting characters. And I think that's why I stayed in the bar. Like, I remember I had a friend at one point, he's like, dude, like, how long are you going to stay in the bar for? And I was like, you're right, I got to get out. So I like literally just quit and left. Because I was already training so many people, I didn't really need to be there. But I just, it was all that cash coming in. It was paying the mortgage, I did all that shit. And I was like, okay, it's time. But I mean, the cast of characters was nuts. And that was probably like, where I got a lot of my best friends were bar guys. They weren't bodybuilders, They were just like really cool guys that I knew that were working in the clubs and a lot of really interesting guys, wide range. I mean, the drug dealers and the chief of police and the fire captain because he comes by and talks to you, and you also know the dude from city council that gets hammered at your bar early before the band comes on. And you're just talking to all these characters. It's fucking Piano Man for 16 years, And so, I mean, that's a lot of my experience with people is just, I've always been in a loose atmosphere. I never worked in a stiff office where you couldn't joke. It was always fucking ass grabbing and dick jokes and fucking laughing. And you really see people when you're around those. Like when you take away the constraints, think of the amount of time most people spend at their job, they're not around everyone in their natural state. Nobody's in their natural state at most people's jobs. They're in their work job, their work self, their innie, And I was in an atmosphere where I was working around people who were just their regular selves. So you really see people. And I think that's maybe why my perspective on people's a little different, because I know the real shit that the city council guy was up to. And I know, like, you know what I mean? Like, other people don't think like that.
I'm just trying to reconcile the bodybuilding makes no sense in your life to me.
That's the outlier here,
I mean, the only bodybuilders I've talked to are ones that I know have crazy stories.
Right.
Like AV, basically, like, for example. Like Antoine, and like wild.
Oh,
shit.
yeah. Heat-seeking missile with
dude.
no guidance system.
Love it.
And just love it. I
Just
love
got
it.
2 keys turned to nuclear all day, every day.
I know.
And it's just, I imagine you sitting at a round table or even going to like an athlete's meeting, right? Like you're checking in for a show, you're getting your number, all that stuff. And like what about bodybuilding was so enticing that you leaned in on it? Because it seems antithetical to your whole MO.
Right. Well, it was extreme. I had, I know now looking back, there was something in me that was like very punk rock, like fuck you society. I'm not going to be one of you. And for some reason, bodybuilding got the hook.
Okay.
You know, I could have easily wound up in another form of that, like a punk band or, you know,
Liberty spikes.
yeah, or
vest.
something. You know, maybe living in the bush, growing my own food with lots of rifles. I don't know, but something about fuck society is part of the bodybuilding. It was I wanted, you know, I remember when I was young, like when I was 19 years old and I was I was 250 at 19. You know, benching 4 plates. I mean.
Jesus.
I remember walking through the mall with my Gators Gym boat neck shirt and my 5-plate shrug traps, you know, back in the mid-'90s, and just loving that everyone was like, fuck, what the fuck is that? Because now people are more used to muscles. Like, oh, you know, fuck, how many guys have good arms, you know? But back in the 90s, you went to the mall with your traps coming out of your shirt from the gym to go to the food court and grab some food with the guys, and everyone was just looking at you in your Gators hoodies and shit, and you're just freaks. Like, you were disgusting. Like, those guys are fucking, ugh.
You're from,
you know?
Where are you from again?
Grand Prairie, Alberta.
All right.
Yeah.
So, like, I can understand growing up in New York City. I can understand growing up, even in Toronto for the Canadian equivalent, and coming off with this anti-establishment ethos.
Right.
But growing up on a farm in Grand Prairie, where does like the anarchist mindset? Where does that come from? I don't get.
So, well, my mom and dad were very conservative farmers, so I was told stuff like,
Religious?
no,
Okay, interesting.
no, but politically, like, the government doesn't need to know anything about us.
Oh, it's
If
like
anybody,
that.
if the police ever come to the door, you tell them to wait outside.
Oh, what?
You know what I mean? Like, I remember my dad telling me that.
So
Yeah.
for American listeners, Alberta, and for Jordan's, he's American. Alberta is Canada, Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
so that doesn't contextualize that.
I grew up with 2 big rifle racks in the coat room of the house. So right in the front door. So you come in the front door and you come around the corner where you put your shoes and hang your jackets. Shotguns, 30-06s, pump actions, lever action, 30-30s, everything up on the wall. And the ammo is just in a loose
He has an
drawer.
erection, by the way.
Just
my
in.
dick's
Yeah,
rock hard.
you had him at 30-aught something.
okay,
It was
okay.
just full mass.
So-
It was actually the pump.
Yeah, the pump, and the unlocked drawer full of ammo. I still remember the unlocked drawer. You just pull it out, and the shotgun shells and and it just unlocked, you know, like. Yeah. And I remember that was just how I grew up. But it was, you know, I remember we sat around the kitchen table. I was in one of those families right out of a TV show where I was lucky as fuck. Every single night was a farm-cooked dinner, roast beef, mashed potatoes, vegetables, dessert, every night.
The 19250 makes a little bit more sense.
Right,
now. Yeah.
right, yeah. Oh, I was,
Kids eat well.
I was extremely food lucky, man. I ate like a king, and I look back on it now and fuck. But so we had like turkey dinner, steaks off the barbecue, you know. If my mom was really exhausted, we'd get like a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken. You know what I mean? Like one of those things. And
if that's worst case scenario, we're living. Dog.
But
Good
we
for you.
we would sit as a family and we would watch the 6 o'clock news and eat our dinner. So I watched the news every night from the time I can't even remember how old I was. CBC News every fucking night, 6 o'clock news. So I grew up on the news. And then by the time we're on dessert, the first sitcom's starting at 7. So you're watching Cheers or something. I don't know what started at 7, but we'd finish with that, right? You know, so or something would come on. But I remember watching the news and I would hear my dad muttering, you know, be like, fuck, this war is going to make grain prices go down. You know, so I was getting a lesson in economics from my dad, and then my mom would say something. She'd be like, "Yeah, but you know, if this happens and this happens, you know, blah blah blah." And then so I was getting this like kind of worldly view of Like, I remember when I went to college, I just took business for a year and a half. It was a joke. But I remember in economics, the teacher was trying to explain, like, supply and demand. And, like, there were people that couldn't grasp the concept. And I just remember being like, what the fuck? Or you, like, I already could explain. I already knew exactly where he was going. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's going to drive this up. It's going to blow. Like, you know, I was aware of that stuff. But I got that all from my mom and dad. And every time the government did anything, raised a tax or whatever, my dad would be, fucking government. Got their hand on my wallet. You know, like, so I had a lot of that growing up. So.
Did that news cycle, that exposure, you think drive you to want to travel? Like, do you remember? Because that's, if you don't know Canadian geography and you don't know Grand Prairie, where it sits in the relative rank order of like what did you remember meeting your first person of ethnicity, let's say?
Yeah. So it's a good question.
This is okay, right there.
No, this is a good question. This is a good question because Grand Prairie you're right. It's very northernly, but I remember like things were so different back then, right? I remember like there was a lot of Chinese people in Grand Prairie. I had there were kids in my class. I had a couple of Chinese kids in my class, and then I remember there was like one black African American student or African Canadian student, I guess, in my school, but I mean. I remember there was the guy that owned the Dairy Queen was a Chinese guy. And my dad used to talk about how good of a businessman he was. He would be like, oh, that Kenny Ma, man, he's just killing it. He was so smart to buy that land and blah, 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 blah. And I remember, so I was getting a mini real estate lesson all the time from him too, because we'd drive down through town and he'd be like, I could have bought that property and now they're developing it. You make sure you get land when you're older, like blah, blah, you know, like I got a lot of that from him. But it was an interesting place. And the traveling, it comes from, I remember my friend, BJ. He came into the gym one day, and I hadn't seen him for a year. Like, he just vanished, and then he showed up. And I was like, BJ, where have you been? He's like, I just got back from Hong Kong. And I was like, what were you doing in Hong Kong? And he's like, it was fucking awesome. I just went there, and I wound up modeling, doing movies, did a TV commercial, he bartended, he had all this crazy story. And then I remember he looked right at me and he goes, you got to get the fuck out of this town. And I was like, ugh. And I remember that was something that changed my life. Like, I remember being like, he's right. Because I was just bodybuilding in Grand Prairie with no direction, and I was like 19 years old. And he's like, go somewhere. And so I was like, huh. And I remember I grew up, I was one of those kids that had the wall of National Geographics. So I had that yellow wall in my basement, just rows and rows of National Geographics. And I remember there was an issue that was all Australia. Like, it had Ayers Rock on the front, you know. And I remember reading that issue cover to cover when I was like probably 17 or something. And I remember really wanting to go there. So I thought, So when I was 19, I looked into work visas. They were easy to get. They had Australian work visas, and Canadians could get them no problem. So I just got one of those and thought, well, I might as well go through Asia because that's the cheaper flight.
Right.
Because you could go like...
China?
No, I went Tokyo, Hong Kong, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and then Australia. And I thought I'll spend a week in each place. So I went through Asia, and I wound up staying in Hong Kong for 3 weeks. Yeah, that was crazy.
Hong Kong is wild.
And then when we were pretty much out of money, I was with my buddy. When we were pretty much out of money, we went to Australia and we got jobs. And so that's when I stayed there I actually wound up there for 2 years. But that was how that all started. And I just hooked up with some bodybuilders right off the bat at the gym. And within weeks, I had a job and I had a training partner and he was living with a bodybuilder.
So you just booked one-way flight?
Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
Or that.
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, I just had a one-way flight. I was like, well, I'll come home when I run out of money, you know, or I hate it.
2 years later.
Yeah, well, I actually came home for a year. I had a 1-year visa, came home for a year and went to college.
Yeah.
Went back for another year and then came home.
Do you have a favorite place in the world?
Probably the Gold Coast, Australia.
Yeah. We were just there, a month ago, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I love here.
Yeah.
This is an amazing place to live. Like, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. But the Gold Coast, I fucking love. Yeah, it's awesome. I had so many memories there because I worked right on Surfers Paradise. Like I worked right on Orchid Avenue, and I lived right in that area, and I used to go to that McDonald's on the corner right on the beach every day, and like all that shit. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It was great. I got a chance to go back in 2017. And for the Arnold, right? We went down for the Arnold, and then I took my girlfriend Emily up to the Gold Coast for a week, and I showed her where I used to live. And I went to the old club I used to work at like 4 p.m, and I just looked, and the lights were on, and I knocked on the door, and this guy came and opened the door. And I was like, hey, dude, I used to work here in 1996. Do you think I could just walk around? And he's like, and then he was like an old grizzled bar vet, and he goes, was it called Santa Fe Gold? And I go, yes. And he goes, starts laughing, and he goes, oh, man, come on in. And Australian accent. But, and so I went in, and he just let me walk around. It's like, it's not the same type of club anymore, but it's still a club. But it was just crazy how, like, I got to go look at the room, and it was funny.
Do you ever find yourself in the same position as your buddy that came back from Hong Kong, like just going up to people and be like, have you ever seen the movie Get Out?
Yes.
Where it's like he takes the picture and like the black dude snaps out of it, realizes he's been brainwashed, and he runs and grabs him and his nose is bleeding. He's like, get out! I feel like I've done that to so many people.
I've done that to a couple of people.
Like just like get the fuck on a plane and go somewhere you're not familiar with. Yeah. Have you done that for other people?
Yeah, I've told people to like, you gotta go travel, man.
Yeah.
That I get a little frustrated when people speak in a way and like they really know the world and they don't have a passport. I'm like, you got to go somewhere. When they speak really romantically of a place that I've been that actually kind of was rough, I'm like, no, that's not like that.
Give me an example.
Well, I went to Qatar.
That's real.
I went to Qatar.
That's real. Yeah.
I went to Qatar, and first of all, I've never been treated so well. My host was unbelievable. Yeah. Like, it was one of my clients. His wife made all my meals. It was what a crazy trip. But I had a lot of problems with the things I saw there. Like how they've got people doing all the really crazy, ridiculous physical labor in the heat are all like all the poor immigrants. Yeah. And it's, how it is. It's unregulated. There's people dying on the construction sites. They just fill the holes with concrete. And just, how do you build 200 skyscrapers in 1 year?
Yeah.
Well, you don't do it with labor laws and
same way they built the pyramids. Human death and suffering.
Yeah, and fucking no air conditioning there, like outside working. Like,
even
it's crazy.
The World Cup stadium this year.
Yeah, and then, all the hullabaloo about the World Cup and everything. Yeah. Like, I felt that because I was there in 2012 and I got it. But, like, some people don't, I don't know. Some people don't see the danger in the world. Yeah. Some people they're a little too sunshine and rainbows, and so those people can drive me crazy too. Because I got some cynic in me too, right?
Yeah, more of that. Let's hear about that. I remember getting back to the States and getting a female Uber driver. I'm like, that's weird. I'm like, wait, why is that weird? I'm like, because I was living in a place where, for the most part, most women didn't drive.
Yeah.
They couldn't even show anything about their fucking eyeballs. Like,
well,
right, because it's
not. And it's and we're allowed to be bothered by it.
But more of the world is that than what we have. That's the crazy part.
Yeah. So people who complain about how things are now.
Yeah.
Like, my favorite thing to say to someone who, like some spoiled college student who has a lot to say about the world. I'm like, do you realize that no matter who you are, no matter what color you are, no matter what you think or do or where you're from, this is the best time to ever live, everywhere. And that's just an argument ender for how corrupt or terrible our system is. I'm like, things are better than ever for everyone. And we got to remember that. We got to give ourselves some credit and have some gratitude for all the things that we have in our society that make it the way it is.
Yeah, because bodybuilding in itself is such, like, it's a white fluffy dog in a Louis Vuitton handbag. Like, it's such a luxury piece of our society.
Such an incredibly luxurious and privileged way to live your life.
Like, it is opulence and grandiosity and and
it is
and gluttony, like
yeah.
all of the
and
sins
the ultimate
in one.
amount of wasted time and like
resources.
relative to resources. Yeah.
Like I feel bad, and I felt bad ordering food some places.
You know, they say like an almond requires doesn't it require like
10 liters
like
of water,
10 liters of water
bullshit,
a day, or some I don't know, some ridiculous amount of water, more than anything else that you grow. So that's why almonds are so expensive. Well, bodybuilders are like almonds on steroids.
Well, literally. Yes.
Like
they're on 10 liters of tren a day to make this almond.
So you see this bodybuilder and you're like, there's what? In a life of a bodybuilder, is like how many cows went into that one body? How many chickens went in? Yeah. So I remember I calculated once that I'd eaten 250,000 egg whites. And I don't even remember when that was because it's gotten bigger since then. So like just think of that. Like all those liters of egg whites I chugged and all the liters of egg whites I lived on. And I used to do the egg white sugar-free ketchup instead of fish, right? So I just laugh when I think of some of the stuff I did to put my, a quarter inch on my arms.
And I just can't stand, like, it comes back to the lack of world views that bodybuilders have, because they think that, like, Kuba. Do you know Kuba?
Yeah.
So I've talked to him. You know Kuba. We were just in Rotherham. He messaged me and goes, man, I'm going to come travel. I'm going to come to Dubai. What are you doing next April? I'm like, dog, are you? I'm going to live in 7 different countries before next April. Like, you can't. I'm going to be moving. It's like, that's you accepting a world view is like, what are you doing in 14 months?
Right.
Like, you get with the program, man. Come on.
That's funny.
Oh,
yeah.
To me, you've probably, because with what you have now with West Coast Iron, with the podcast, with sort of being a household name in bodybuilding, especially Canadian bodybuilding, you seem to not only understand the importance of like variety and culture and experience, you seem to understand leverage better than anyone. Whether it's directly something you cooked up and you're like, oh, I'm going to use this to open these doors and I'm going to just further my career this way. Because most bodybuilders, like, they just don't seem to be able to understand, like, they have a better opportunity now with social media to leverage the storytelling capability at scale that Instagram allows you. Like, Instagram literally, the thing that they added that everyone's like, what is this? They called it stories. These are your stories.
Yeah.
And bodybuilders are just like ripping a vape pen, playing fucking Call of Duty. It's like, that's your story? Are you fucking retarded? But it's like you didn't have those resources at your disposal, and you still leverage what you had to tell a better story.
Well, all we had really was relationships before social media. That's all we had was relationships.
But that's all we have now.
Yeah, it's all we really have.
Which is the crazy thing that people
Because
miss.
Instagram owns our Instagram. They can just turn it off.
Yeah.
And then we're just stuck with the people we have relationships with. The analog life. We're just back to analog.
This guy. Say that again in 30-06, he'll nut.
Oh. That's funny. You know what I mean? It's you have to remember how temporary and unowned a lot of our stuff is. Like everything is, yeah. And how quickly, are people paying attention right now? Like, they're talking about rationing energy in Europe right now. Like, they're talking about
Germany's buying up firewood and shit.
Yeah, like they're in Norway. They got firewood at some of the schools for the wood burning furnaces because some of the old schools still have them. Like, they're getting ready. Like, man, people live in their delusional state where everything is just all about one thing. Like, try to have I was a linebacker, man, head on a swivel. Someone's coming for you too, Well, there's an old lineman with a target on the side of your head, and it's like gas prices, and it's coming.
But what gets me with the bodybuilders not having this perspective is, like, nothing is more overt in your face, giving you that perspective. Like, if you ask 9 out of 10 I don't want to pick on bodybuilders. I'm just trying to contrast away from the herd, because if you ask any of them what's going on right now about Germany or Norway, they'd have no idea. But it's
most people, though, to be fair. Most people, yeah.
But if you were to talk to a bodybuilder and ask them how many close friends have they lost in the last 2 years, And that's not enough of a wake-up call to realize, like you said, it's like, you were talking about Instagram, like, hey, it's, it's not for long. Instagram owns your Instagram. It's like, we don't own anything. This whole motherfucking thing's a lease.
Like,
this is all getting paid
it's
back.
all a lease,
right?
yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And with bodybuilders, it blows me away because it's like, guys, you're literally... it's like it's an obituary now. Like the last 2 years has been unprecedented, the number of bodybuilders we lost, and the fact that hasn't been a wake-up call to go out and just gain experience, live your goddamn life, do something outside of that. But it almost seems like they've just doubled down, and it's like, I'm going to make sure that person did not die in vain by eating tilapia and playing COD, ripping on a vape pen. It's like, oh, you fucking morons. Drives me insane.
Well, it's, I think of how I was at my most bodybuilder. You know what I mean? Like, I try to remember back to when I was the deepest in to the shit, And it's totally different from what I see now. It's totally different. There's so much reward now but there's so much, the dopamine rush from the and
the instant gratification.
There's so much of that now available to you if you just play the game. Like, we're all in control of our own dopamine levels. I can go give myself a huge dose right now. I can do a couple of stories and then just watch them click, 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 click. And you know what I mean? Like, you can do that. You put up a pec shot. Oh, I got some likes, Like, you can do that, but we didn't have, like, we were doing it without dopamine for like 11 months of the year. There was no gratification. You were just going to the gym. You're doing chest today, and most people didn't care. And then you went home, and no one cared. And then you had to go the next day and do back, and no one was going to care about that either. You know what I mean? It was different. You had to really, really love to train. Like, you had to really fucking want to train. Like, I remember going through training partners. Like, I have people come and train with me, and they just fall off because I was the one that was, like, never missing workouts. They're like, oh, I can't do delts today. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm, like, one step away from being done with you because I'm doing delts.
Can you compare the dopamine? Because you said dopamine earlier when you were talking about learning a trick.
Yes.
And you said, like, nothing compares to that.
Yeah. So a new PR on something. I remember the first time I squatted 4 plates. Like, that was like a life-changing thing. Yeah. I was 16 years old. It was the summer before grade 12. And I buried 405 and stood up with it. And the guys at the gym popped, like, hands up in the air. Everyone jumped, like the older guys behind me.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, holy fuck. And I was like I was 7 feet tall for like the rest of the summer, And I walked into that gym every day for the whole summer, and everyone in that gym knew I squatted 4 plates, and it was that fucking 16-year-old kid's fucking, you know what I mean?
Insane.
And that, like, fuck, that dopamine rush. And that's what I get. That's what you get when, you step on the scale and you're finally 250. Or the day I stepped on the scale and I was finally 300. Fuck! Or finally 320. Or the day I remember emailing Chad Nichols, I'm 330 fucking pounds. I remember telling him that.
What the fuck?
I remember, like, what the fuck, like, that rush. And that's what I get now from, like, learning a new trick or getting a new riff down where I can play a new riff. I'm like, fuck, I can actually play that. You got to chase it, and I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to get it here anymore that way.
But do you feel like it's like the feeling is the same, but the accomplishments are relative to the times? Like, people probably feel like, the metrics on social media, like, man, I got fucking 10 reshares. Yeah, like, who gives a shit?
Right, it's a different
But
type.
Like, do you think the feeling is the same? Because, like, he bodybuilded. He did a bodybuilding show.
Yeah.
At a time where no one gave a fuck.
No.
Like,
My
what
parents
year?
Didn't even give a fuck.
What year?
2011, 2010.
Yeah,
Okay.
That was way before. You didn't even have Instagram at that time.
Didn't have Instagram.
No.
Yeah. So
you just had Facebook, and
I
you still
did have
had you
Facebook.
just still had to put your status complicated
It's complicated.
back then with a
right.
music quote.
Exactly.
But it's like, I wonder if people feel the same way that I feel. And it's so hard to grade, like,
Yeah.
I feel more than you. My concern is, like, you can objectively look at the accomplishments that those feelings evoke and be like, okay, those are different. You can look at you know, a 405 squat at 16 and be like, not a lot of kids do that. But you can look at the number of people that get 10 reshares or whatever, like the stupid watered down social media metric is. My concern is the feelings are the same, but the outcomes are so drastically different. And it takes so much less to do to get that feeling. You know what I mean? Like you're trading in an inflated currency.
Yeah, or I guess it's a different currency. And they value it as much as you valued the old currency. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's, to get that rush, you had to, the number on the scale had to move. Like, you had to put in so much work to do that. It's a different type of thing. It's a longer play. It's you can't, like, you could do a video today and you could just get lucky and it could get 1 million hits. Mm-hmm. Right? But
we're banking on it.
There's nothing before that where you could do that.
Right.
There was no, like, the concept of viral, like, doesn't apply to how bodybuilding used to be.
Yeah.
There was nothing viral about muscle growth, or like it all took so much time. Yeah. So there was
viral in 90s bodybuilding was AIDS. That's what that was HIV. Yeah. That's the one viral we're worried about.
I was going to the wrong after party.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like hitting the lottery versus building a business and earning $1 million.
Right.
It's kind of what it almost feels like, right?
Are you worried about, I know worried's the wrong term, but like, do you ever look at the current state of bodybuilding and kind of like, like you seem like a pretty, I mean, I've known you for a few years. You seem like a pretty optimistic guy. I've followed you since long before I met you. But is part of you look at the industry now and just like, are you concerned about the future of men's open bodybuilding?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I have concern. I guess I sort of feel like I don't want to be the grumpy old guy that keeps talking about how things used to be and sounds like that. Like, I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
I'm happy to crack some jokes and tell some stories, but I don't want to ever come off as like, these guys now, they're doing that. I don't want to be like that. It's different. There's so many more opportunities now. I'm certainly not concerned for the amount of opportunity in the industry. That's ridiculous. Like, we all got contact with 1 billion people on our phone now. As far as the actual bodybuilding, there shouldn't be divisions where just anybody can compete. Like, and I mean, the barrier to entry is supposed to be fairly high. You know what I mean? It used to be higher, I think. The barrier to entry used to be higher.
Are you talking into the pro ranks?
No, well, I'm just talking about the levels, how it's structured differently, how the pro cards are given out now. And, I mean, I agree there were too few pro cards given out back in the day. Like think of like 1989 where there was literally one American turned pro the whole year, right? I remember there's that sweet spot where like the USA's got a card. Everyone at the Nationals got a card. All the class winners got a card. They always kind of did at that Nationals, NPC Nationals. Then there was the USA's and there was the North Americans. And I remember when they started giving a second pro card out of the overall at like the USA's. They were given a second card, but he was still a class winner. I remember thinking, that's a good idea because you get so bottlenecked that you might get the same class winner like 4 fucking times. And that guy is like, once you're multiple class winners, I get it. Move them on. So I remember they hit a sweet spot where I thought this is good. And then they started doing like top 2 at Nationals and 3 cards out of the overall. And they started doing a lot of that. And, and then all the Arnolds came along. So there's all those more cards. And then all the amateur Olympias, there's all those more cards. And now there's just so many more cards. So, it does, and then all the other divisions have even more cards, right? Like how many bikini cards they give out at Nationals in the States?
I have one.
Right.
I have one. You didn't know?
So
I've had a harder time getting my parking validated at a ball before.
And here's where we bring the podcast all the way back to the law of supply and demand and how that drops the price of something.
Right.
Its value is less.
Yeah.
And I can't get away from that. You have a demand, and the supply must be a little less than the demand to keep the value. And when you crank up the supply, the value drops, and that's what's happened to pro cards. And, you know, I mean, there's lots of great bodybuilders that have gotten their pro card in this era. That's cool. And also keep in mind that I've always believed it's what you do with the card. At the end of the day, who cares how you got it if you wind up being a good bodybuilder or you do something really great with your card? That's cool. But I do think they've devalued them.
I think we've recapitulated what we mean by value, what people value. People value entertainment. People value good social media content. People value a YouTube following. Like, they don't value like a relatively or subjective or objectively better physique anymore.
That's very correct.
That's kind of how I look at like how they've curbed this inflation issue, is they've just recapitulated the currency to a social currency. And it's, because it's sad for me to think, because like when I look back and I go to Gold's in Venice, and how many times have you trained there?
20
times. And it's like you look up on the wall and it's like they have all the Olympia winners and like the sun faded, you know, in that first room. And
or all the USA guys on that one wall. It's all sun faded.
You know all of them.
Yeah.
But it's like I remember being 17, getting Muscular Development magazines on a monthly basis on subscription. John Romano is still the the whole 9 yards, and thinking like I started as even at that turning point. So what would that be? 2007, 2008. Thinking like the turnover rate's getting pretty high here. Like me being at 18 years old, not even like into bodybuilding, getting into the gym, starting to think that like, there's a lot of new guys all the time. Right? So that like high entry, that squeeze, like pros were like Rolexes. You try to buy a Rolex now, it's hilarious. Not that I'm like in the market, but like you walk into a Rolex store and they laugh at you. I'm like, why are you laughing at me? You guys are open and you don't have any products. Right? That's like what pro cards used to be. They used to be like a fucking Daytona. It's like, you can't get a Daytona anywhere.
I remember the very, you know, my earliest memory is that, you know, like there's a pro where, like, how many hours away? Who is it? Like, I remember Mike Matarazzo came to Edmonton to sign autographs once at the Popeyes in the mall. And I drove from Grand Prairie 5 hours down to see Matarazzo. And we started in the morning. We got there by noon. Mike showed up. We did the autograph thing. We stood around and like just fucking stared at him like goofy kids, right? And then we go to the seminar room to do the little seminar, and I rush to the front row and get my seat. You know, and I ask in like half the questions. Boom, 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 boom. And Matarazzo winds up just kind of talking to me for like half the seminar like this, where there's like a room full of people, because I'm asking all the questions, right? And then, you know, he takes his shirt off and hits a front double. He's in the off season, you know, but he kind of just gives us a few shots. And then he goes to put his tank top back on, and I go, hey, I'll buy that tank off you. You know, just if you sign it, and he goes, kid, just have it. And he gave me his tank top. So like I had Matarazzo's tank top, and I remember I came back from the seminar with Matarazzo's tank top. And like, that was like the craziest experience as a kid to meet a pro like Mike Matarazzo. And like, you drove 5 hours. And then I remember Dorian, 10 days after the 93 Olympia, he guest posed in Prince George, BC, which is just like middle of nowhere up north. And so we drove 8 hours through the night. I left my job at the bar at 2 in the morning, got in the car with my buddy. He worked the door too. We drove across the border to BC, through the mountains at night, got to our hotel at like 8 in the morning, fucking checked in, slept till noon, got up, went to the Dorian Yates seminar, and sat right in the front, asked all the questions. And I remember my friend Kevin, his dad was a cop, so he got his dad to bring him a wire. And he wore a wire, and he recorded the whole seminar because they said no recording allowed. So he got a police wire, and he taped it to his neck and his like shoulder over here, and he like sat like right in the front row with me, and he just stayed quiet. And he tried not to breathe on the mic, and we recorded the whole seminar, and we had it on a cassette tape, and we used to like listen to it. I don't know where it is now, but and then Dorian like goes in the back, and we all wait for a bit, and then he comes out and guest poses, 10 days after the 93-0, and we're just like, oh, like my life has just changed. What is this, right? And then he's signing autograph pictures out front, and his calf is like this fucking big, and I remember I go, man, like, what do you do for calves? Like, I already knew, but I just was like, is there any tips for calves? And he's like, don't ask me, man. They just grow.
Sick.
And I was just, but I remember seeing Dorian. We like went to the venue early, and he pulled up in a cab, and he got out of the cab, and I remember just seeing him, like, it was like there was no one. Could have been Michael Jordan. I wouldn't have been more excited. You know what I mean? That was Michael Jordan to me. Like, and he walking right towards us. We're the first guys there. Hey guys, how's it going? Just starts talking to us, And I remember just that was worth the 8-hour drive. And that was the value of a pro. That was what it meant to be a pro. We're Mr. Olympia.
How far right now do we have to walk outside of this room? Obviously, you're a pro. Ditto's not here. How far until we run into a pro in this building?
I bet there's 3 here right now.
Okay. And it's like, obviously, this is a biased sample size.
Very biased sample size. It's not Costco.
Yeah. But, relative, because I think ultimately the number of people into health, fitness, bodybuilding has grown substantially, right? Like, I go through and I wear like the fucking trap shirt and go get my, Manchu walk at the mall. No one gives a fuck anymore because I'm also not jacked. But like, more people, like the social acceptance, the more people that are in the fringes are higher. But I still think the saturation of pros to what it was, like the dynasty eras, like when there was just 6 teams, and again, now I sound like the old man, but like when there was just 6 teams in the NHL, right? Like you'll always remember the original 6, the Chicago, the Montreal, the New York, the
Bees,
the Boston, and Detroit,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You'll always remember those 6 teams, like, but what was the Atlanta team that they had, the Thrashers? Remember when that team was there and now it's not anymore? Now that seems like the state of the world, but bodybuilding seems so sanctimonious to me because it was so fringe.
I guess I sort of feel like, they say every generation feels like their generation's better, right? But I do feel like a huge amount of gratitude that I got to experience the era generally that I did. Like, I got to experience all the fucking hair metal in the 80s and NWA and the grunge movement. And, just like I got to experience all this incredible music and my first Metallica concert and the 90s bodybuilding and meeting Dorian in his prime. And I don't know, I just think like I understand everything changes. I know rock and roll will never be the same as it used to be. I know bodybuilding will never be the way it used to be. But I kind of accept that, and I just say I got such a great era. I'm so fucking lucky.
Do you have a favorite competitor that you stepped on stage with? Like a favorite holy shit moment? Like, yo, I'm standing next to this guy. What the fuck? I'm a kid from Grand Prairie, like working the bars. Now I'm next to this guy.
Yeah. I've had people ask me who the best competitor I ever competed against was, of all those guys that like won the Canadas and stuff. But I remember seeing, I did the Van Pro right after I turned pro. It was a week after I turned pro. I just came out here and did it. I remember being backstage, and it was this tiny show. There was hardly any of us in it, but Fouad was in it.
Oh, he's sick. Yeah.
And that was 2015, so he was kind of at his prime, maybe like the tail end of his prime. Like he was still winning. He won that show, right? And I remember looking at Fouad pumping up, and I remember just being like, I remember realizing at that moment, because I knew I was at the tail end of I knew that was probably my last show. And I just thought, man, I got to compete with some badass motherfuckers. Like that guy is just smash mouth football bodybuilding. And he went all the way to the top. He went to the O. And I have a lot of respect for him. And I remember looking at him backstage, and I remember in 06 when I got second to him. He won the Canadas, and I got second to him, right? And I remember the physique he was in 06, 227 pounds. I remember it. And I remember at the Vancouver Pro, he was like 250 something or whatever, 252, working with Meadows, right? And I remember just being like, man, that's a good bodybuilder. Like he's going to win the show hands down easy. And he went a long ways. Yeah.
I saw him early days. So I trained in the same gym as Fouad when I was a kid.
With the blue lockers?
Windsor, Ontario. That was Lifestyles. fitness on Central. We called it Meathead Central.
Yeah.
And you had to contest with Paul Lozon. And he had his own dumbbells, his own 200-pound dumbbells, and with whiteout, big Ivanko steels, that at the end of the rack are their own little separate rack. Own like little chop welded rack with just two things. Then Fouad Abiad, 200 pounds. And you better not. Don't even
That's
look at him.
so funny.
Especially Fouad in those days. Don't look at him. Don't look at him. Maybe you can look at Paul, because Paulie's like the nicest guy in the fucking world. But even then, Paulie was like the sweetest dude. But
Fouad's chilled out a lot, but yeah.
Yeah, we had him on the pod, and I don't want to out him, but we did a podcast with Fouad, and he's like, yo, don't record it. Like, don't release it. So we have it unreleased. I think I'm going to make it an NFT.
Okay.
But we have a podcast with Fouad that we never released.
Is it good?
It's great. It's amazing. You can hear him breathing the entire time. But other than that, the thing we didn't, he told stories about kind of when he was in that mode.
Yeah.
What the person he had to be, and he was so kind of he's so not that now that he's yo, I don't want that. I was like, yeah, dude, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's funny of all people that's someone that you look back at, because you guys.
Yeah, he would be the best bodybuilder I ever competed against.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember another good story I like to tell is the first time I saw Frank McGrath.
Okay. I have a couple of Frank stories.
Yeah, so the 2001 Nationals, he showed up in Halifax, and he was in the super heavies. And I remember seeing him backstage, and I was like, that fucking guy's got an incredible physique, but he's just not quite hard enough. Yeah. And I was like, I should beat him. And I did. I was like top 5. He was like 8th, I think, 7th, 8th. And I remember after the show, he was totally by himself, I think. And I ran into him, and I was like, hey, man, you look really good. And I asked him about his arms, and it's just funny. I was like, your arms are fucking crazy. And he was a quiet guy, but he was funny. And I just said, yeah, I hope to see you again, And he goes, yeah, I just got to get leaner, I guess. And I think I said something to him like, well, if you would have been a heavyweight, you might have won the heavyweights, because you would have been down in weight. You would have been leaner, right? So then 02, I don't see him. And I get third in 02. And then I go back in 03, and he's there. And he's in shape. And I remember when he stripped down, I looked pretty good that year. But when he stripped down, I was like, oh, fuck. I just knew I wasn't going to beat him. Because just the way he looked like Arnold. He's standing backstage with just the pec, delt, arm, tricep, forearm just hanging. And, he wasn't the biggest dude. My legs were as big as his and everything. But the arms in the front double were just so fucking crazy. And he just looked so much he looked like a huge classic pro now. He almost kind of had a Bumsteady look to him, in those days. Tiny waist and crazy, And I remember just thinking, fuck. And I quite often think, he had he had the best genetics of anyone I ever competed against.
Yeah, because what he talks about his prep. I think he even posted about it the other week. Everything from the drugs to the Subway cookies. It was dude, could have been further off the mark when it come to actually tying in all the elements of a physique, but still shows up looking like that.
Yeah. Yeah. You learn that that's how the world is, man. I mean, some people walk into a gym to start bodybuilding, and 3 years later they win the USA's, like Phil Heath, and it's not like that for everybody.
Yeah. I think bodybuilding is good. Killian put something up the other day that resonated with, you can try as hard as you want and still be bad at something. I think you get sold this bill of goods where it's if you just try and if you eat your vegetables and say your prayers, you can. It's no.
Yeah.
You can't. Some people still got to bag groceries at Walmart. Sorry. You can try as hard as you want, but sometimes, because bodybuilding is a cruel, unrelenting truth. But it has to prepare you for life. There's nothing you can't, you come across now that you're okay. Well,
I actually joke with my one buddy that I ride flatland with. I said, well, bodybuilding completely desensitized me to failure, so I'm perfect for this tedious nonsense that we're doing, because just failing over and over at stuff doesn't faze me anymore.
It's failing almost naked has to be that much harder. Failing with clothes on is exponentially easier.
How did I wind up in those positions, failing in front of people in my underwear? If you look at it from that perspective,
is how can I tell you something? That's how most of the world looks at it.
Yeah.
Those are just people in their underwear.
Yeah.
Like, you know how strange it is that we've normalized people just like not even taking their pants all the way off, but just pushing them down to their ankles and in public with so many people around just taking photos. You know how weird that is?
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
Do you though?
Well, so here's
a
test. If you have a normal friend, like a totally normal friend, like I have a friend, he's an RCMP cop, you know, he's in a fantasy football league, he's got 3 kids. If I open my Instagram and hand it to him, just let him scroll through it, he is transported to a different world that does not exist to him.
Yeah.
He sees the reels of all these fucking hot chicks shaking their asses. And, like, I'm just on there trying to look at BMX memes, and they're throwing these women in my reels, and you know how it is.
Suggested, yeah.
Suggested
maybe
reels.
you want to go ruin your life.
Yeah, so he's like, your suggested reels, what are these? And he's like scanning through my suggested reels. He's like, what the fuck? And I'm like, welcome to the fitness world.
Yeah.
And he's like, I couldn't have Instagram if this was my Instagram. Like my wife looks at my Instagram and it's like football, you know, cabins, fishing. And I look through your Instagram, there's no way. And I was just like, it's just so, I don't even notice it. It's so crazy.
I was in Singapore with a friend of mine 2 weeks ago, and he's a prep coach, and he does like WBFF females. So his job is buttholes.
Oh yeah.
Like the waitress dropped a pot of coffee behind him because I'm like, dog, you got to go like back to a wall when you sit and because we were having breakfast and he has laptop off, he was doing his check-ins, and like the waitress walked by, looked on his screen, and it was just like check-in photos, and it's just butthole. And the girl just like dropped the pot of coffee. She's like, "What the fuck is that?" It's like our ability to normalize things is really, it's frightening.
Yeah.
And it's and I think again, it's the frequency, it's the rate, it's the pitch of the fitness and its inundation and the acceptance of these things. That just it's getting weird. I feel like in the Joker. Have you seen the Joker movie?
Yeah.
Where he's sitting there smoking the cigarette, talking to his shrink. He goes, "Is it just me? Or is the world getting crazier out there?" Every day. I'm sitting there like, fuck, it's insane. But the fact that you've seen it come from like, when was your first show?
So I technically did like a local show in 1991 when I was just a kid. Because there was like the bodybuilders at the gym. There was like an unsanctioned local show, and it was being put on by the supplement store in the gym. And they were like, yeah, you know, we sold a couple hundred tickets and everything. And they're like, yeah, you do the juniors and the men's class. And I was like, okay. So I did the juniors, and I won the juniors because I like had biceps and quads. And then so in 92, the next year I did it again and won the juniors again. And I didn't realize that like it was an unsanctioned show, so it wasn't really leading anywhere. I was just having fun. And then again in 93, I did it again. So I did these 3 local shows, and I did like the juniors every time. And then I remember in 93, one of the judges was Winston Green, who is a former Mr. Canada, and he owns a gym up in Grand Prairie. And Winston judged, and he came to me backstage, because by then I was 17 years old, right? And he comes to me backstage, and he goes, you look pretty good. He's like, how much do you weigh? And I was like, 200 pounds. And he's like, okay, how tall are you? And I said 6'1". And he goes, okay, you have to be 225 to 230 pounds because that's how big Gary Stratton is. And I was like, okay. And he's like, so his gym was across town. I didn't train there. But he's like, when you're 260 pounds or 265 pounds, you'll probably be ready to be 230 on stage. So keep that in mind. Why don't you train and eat until you hit that? And I was like, okay. So I just put my head down, and then in 97, I hit 265. And I was like, okay, magic number. I can do a show now because I should be around 230. And that's why I prepped for the 97 Northern Albertas was my first real show. And I came in at 230 pounds exactly at weigh-ins. And I won the heavyweights. Didn't win the overall, though. This like middleweight guy beat me in the overall, and I was like, how? I didn't get it.
But you've been doing this for like at least 30 years.
Yeah. I'm in my 34th year of training.
The fact that you're still in the trenches every day, own the gym, and still like I'm trying to bring you into my cynical, negative world. The entire time, like, no, come with me. I have so much hatred. Here, come sit down. Come sit. I'll show you all the things we could be mad at. But the fact that you're sort of just like, Nah, it's all good. Like, just grateful to be here. Like, that's the takeaway. You're the fucking GOAT, man. I appreciate it.
I appreciate that, man. I try to stay stress free, and I try to be. I hate to like, quote people or anything like that, or like But I really do think like, you see people on Instagram talking about gratitude and all that. But I actually really like that. It works for me. Like, try to be grateful for everything you have and all the opportunity you have and the moments you have in every day that are yours. And, try to just fucking take a moment and breathe. And I know it's chaotic and hectic, and there's certain days that go by where I'm like, fuck, I haven't even talked to my girlfriend today. Like, I didn't see her this morning, and it's like 6 o'clock at night. I haven't even talked to her. You just take a minute, man. Like, you get carried away. We all work our asses off now. Like, do you ever stop working?
No.
Do you have hours?
No.
That concept is lost on people. They go, when do you work? I go, I everything I do kind of contributes to my work. Like, I don't understand you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you just got to I think people are bad at paying attention to their real life for a minute, And I just try to do that every day. And owning a dog, I have a dog. Owning a dog is like, I understand there'll be a time when he's gone and I'll have to be, without a dog for a while, but then I'll get another dog. Like, I do not ever see my life without a dog. That's just a thing that is, part of being happy to me. So that's another thing. Get a dog, lift weights, have fun.
Ron Partlow. Heard it here first. Instagram, podcast, where can people find you?
Rep 300. I've been Rep 300 since the message boards back in 99. So I'm still Rep 300. It's Just Bodybuilding. The podcast is found on the Think Big Bodybuilding Media Network on YouTube. So just type in It's Just Bodybuilding or Think Big Bodybuilding and you'll get the channel. And it's me and Dusty Hanshaw and our producer Scott McNally, and we have a blast. And it's not really about bodybuilding. It's kind of about some bodybuilding and then a bunch of nonsense. So it's a lot of fun if you're into that sort of thing.
And then if you're in the I can never say the name of the town. I just say Vancouver.
Port Coquitlam.
Yeah, I'll leave that to you.
So we're out here in Poco. We call it Poco.
Poco. Well
or Pocompton.
I'm not getting that vibe. Not really getting it.
Yeah. So you come out to Port Coquitlam. We're about a half an hour out of Vancouver.
Yeah.
And West Coast Iron, come and train.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Welcome.